Okay, we're back with Telltale. I'm Greg,
I'm Emily.
and this is the Lido Show.
My typos in text message.
That was an autocorrect.
Yes,
thing this
autocorrect really
evening.
likes to mess with me a lot. So every time I try to text Greg anything, it's like autocorrect just makes it into whatever. I don't even know where it comes up with half the stuff. Like, why would... Am I talking about Jared Leto too much? I don't know. Who knows?
I thought that was hilarious. So we're now nicknamed the Lido Show.
We're just going to the Lido Show.
So to start off tonight, we're gonna review The Shadow Witch, which you probably never heard of. But before I get into that, I want to talk about new books coming out for April of 2021. There's some really good ones. Not as long a list as I had last month, but some really... And not any interesting reprints, which was
kind of
unfortunate.
Surprising.
Yeah.
But also, it's kind of good because that means like new literature is coming out that's going to be so renowned. So like we have this moment in history to appreciate what's coming.
And it's interesting that the publishers seem to pick certain months and they just flood all these great books out there. So for April, we've got coming out on April 6th, First Person Singular by Haruki Murakami.
Ooh.
It's a collection of short stories, a brand new book by him, published by Alfred A. Knopf, coming out in hardcover, trade paperback, ebook, and audiobook at the same time.
Wow. Doing the full spectrum all at once.
Yeah. That's another surprising thing is how the publishers, they used to release in hardcover, then you'd wait a year, and then the paperback would come out. And of course, back then, ebooks and audiobooks didn't exist.
Yeah.
These days, they're releasing everything at once, which is odd because they're
instant
like
gratification. It's got to be part of the culture for instant gratification. Like everyone just wants everything.
Some people
instantly
prefer audiobooks, but they don't want to wait a year for it to come out.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So also on April 6th, Hummingbird Salamander, a new novel by Jeff Vandermeer.
That's an interesting name. That would catch my eye on a bookshelf.
And Jeff Vandermeer is the author of Annihilation, which was made into a movie.
I thought,
The Southern Reach trilogy. Mm-hmm. He's quite an amazing current science fiction writer. And him and his wife do a lot of really cool anthologies also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they
that's so
have
fun.
a really excellent mixture of the classic science fiction with new science fiction
I like when
writers.
people do that. I especially like when like couples like become a power couple and just team up and like fuse their creative juices together. I think that's fantastic. I love that people do that.
Yeah. So that's coming out from a publisher named MCD. I've never heard of them.
Okay.
Hardcover, audiobook, ebook on April 6th. On April 13th is Stormland by John Shirley. He's one of the early cyberpunk authors, although I feel he was kind of on the periphery of cyberpunk. He was kind of off doing his own thing a lot. He's very different from like William Gibson and Bruce Sterling.
Yeah.
But he's an amazing writer. And Stormland is coming from Blackstone Publishing in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook on April 13th. And then one that I've just been hearing about everywhere is the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. It's a whole series. Book 6 comes out April 27th from Tor in hardcover, ebook, audiobook. And everybody's looking forward to that. And I'm thinking I want to start reading it because of what I've heard. It's just supposed to be such an excellent series. And I did start reading the first one. The title is escaping me. I did start reading an ebook of it that I have. I'm 30 pages in and really liking it.
Okay.
The character of Murderbot is really cool.
It's an interesting name.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But he seems human.
Oh, interesting.
So far, he seems very.
So he's
human.
like a replicant almost.
Yeah, well, he is part biological, part he's more like a cyborg, half and half.
Or like an android.
He's got a human mind.
Okay, interesting.
And so he's got a human personality, but because he's part robot and because his job is to do security and murder people, these murder bots are all outsiders, kind of like like in Japan and India, they have the Untouchables.
Oh yeah,
They're
they
kind
have
of
that
like that
caste
level
system.
of,
Okay.
and so it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, on April 30th, The Best of Harry Turtledove, who I have only read short fiction by him, and this, of course, will be a lot of his short fiction.
Mm-hmm.
He's very well known for his alternate histories. I
Oh.
believe he is a historian,
Mm-hmm.
and he's made a whole career out of doing nothing but alternate history books.
That's interesting.
And his best of volume is coming from Subterranean Press, which is one of the smaller specialty publishers that we're going to talk about in a future video. And that's coming out in hardcover. So that'll be a little pricier, but worth it because it's a really high-end volume.
Nice. Very nice.
But it'll go fast.
I'm sure it will.
So with that, on to a work of the past. And the reason we review so many of these ancient books that are hard, some of which are hard to come by and a lot of which have been around for so long, is because when we get into publishing, we're not going to have money to buy rights from any living authors or estates. So we're looking at the public domain to get our first books published. So we're looking at a lot of
jewels.
these. Oh yeah,
We found some
like
jewels.
Herland.
Herland was a fantastic
The
book.
Purple Cloud, and When the Sleeper Wakes, and these are public domain books, and nobody's really paying much attention to them.
And they're fantastic.
And the one we're reviewing tonight is in that category of books that are like forgotten. You look for a hardcover edition. I couldn't find one except the print-on-demand facsimile publishers that take all the Project Gutenberg texts and just quick print you a hardcover. They're pretty crappy. They're not high quality.
Yeah.
If you just want to read it quick, they're not expensive. They're all over the internet. But they're not really good books. They're not what Telltale is all about. So you can get the Shadow Witch that way. But even looking on the used bookstore sites for a first edition of this book, I came up with nothing. But you can.
That's because I hit random on Project Gutenberg and it
Exactly.
popped up. So I was like, that sounds interesting.
Well, you have a talent for
Click.
finding these like this that are really challenging.
They just come to me. I don't even try to look for them. They just happen to me. And I'm like, there you are. I was looking for you, but here you are.
But here's what you don't know. This is a sequel.
I figured it was just from the tone.
Yeah.
I could tell that there was a previous story because it alludes to it a lot. And it kind of... It still can stand alone, but I knew...
Oh, yeah.
I could tell just from like the way the first chapter was written, where it's kind of like reiterating a past history that wasn't that isn't touched on as much in this one. I was like, this has to be part of a series, or at least like a sequel to something. So
But
I figured that much.
Now I've got two books I can't find that I want to get for the Telltale collection. Princess White Flame is the first volume of this trilogy. It's a duology. It's just two books. But The Shadow Witch was written by an author named Gertrude Crownfield in 1922.
She had a sweet name, too. That was part of the reason why I was like, this author has a really cool... Gertrude Crownfield.
That's definitely a German grandmother.
Yeah, there you go. But I just knew she had some shit to tell.
Yeah.
Good shit.
And she specialized in children's books, and specialized mainly in children's books on historical themes. And she wrote a lot of books, and she was pretty popular in her day. But she didn't write a whole lot of fantasy. The Shadow Witch and Princess White Flame are her two primary fantasies, and there's one other that I don't think is really fantasy, but it's kind of a
borderline
knights and swords book.
Chivalry.
Yeah, it kind of fits with fantasy though. So I want to get that one too. So we found this on Project Gutenberg and read it as an ebook, which is free. You can go to Project Gutenberg right now, type in The Shadow Witch into the search, and it will come up, and you can download it. And I imagine Princess White Flame is probably in there as well.
I believe it is. Actually, I think at the end of the book I saw a link to it through Project Gutenberg where you could just click the link. So I'll have to double check that. But yeah.
So this is definitely a book you can read. the whole duology
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy. So, do you want to do the synopsis?
Yeah. So I like this story. First of all, super, because the whole thing takes place in a fireplace. Like the world is built as a fairyland that exists in a chimney fireplace
Mm-hmm.
situation. And the Shadow Witch she lives in like the desert of Ash or whatever, the land of Ash, and her brother is an evil magician. And in the previous book, it explains in this book actually pretty well that she had helped one of the princes of the flame fairies, that to escape from her evil magician brother. And she herself is not evil. She just likes mischief. She's kind of like a low key, kind
Yeah,
of
that's
like
what I liked about
god
her
of mischief
character.
kind of feeling. Yeah,
She's got some people that are definitely not liking her much, but
because she's sassy and she plays tricks on people, and she's shadows play tricks on you, so
mm-hmm.
she's the Shadow Witch. They play tricks. So she's kind of made some enemies, and her brother especially was ticked off that he had this prince that he could enslave and whatever, and probably get ransom or whatever. I don't know what happened in the first book, but she helped this prince escape because she found like she really liked him and thought that he was a pretty cool guy and had never really encountered the fairies from the Kingdom of Flames. So this one was a really good first impression. So she assisted him in escaping her brother. So he's pissed. So he decides to invite her and ensnare her, basically, in his cave of coal. And he basically thinks that he's all powerful and can't do it, just goes in and taunts her every day and is a complete asshole. Total jerk. And then one of her, companion shadows, one of her servants, comes looking for her, and the magician just says, "Yeah, I've ensnared her. You aren't going to find her. Ha 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 ha, I'm a jerk." And so she's like, "Well, I can't do anything without my mistress's help, so I've got to try and figure out what I can do to save her." So she's like, "I'm going to go to the prince that she helped in the Kingdom of Flames and tell him what is going on and see if he'll come and save her." So she goes to the Kingdom of Flames, and this old wise man who is an advisor to the king basically says, no, it's not his job to go. We're going to send Prince Ember, his cousin. It's his job to go. He seems to be he has the right personality for this particular journey. So they send Prince Ember and give him this big quest to go and save the Shadow Witch. And so he does, and they have some people that are some beings that they encounter who are enemies of the Shadow Witch and friends of the magician who try to stop them and all this other stuff. And there's this cute little romance that goes on through the whole thing. And it's just a really sweet and fun adventure, and I don't want to ruin the end for you because it's super cute. But yeah, it's a fun little young adult or young person kind of story. But as an adult, I actually really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Greg and I talked a little bit about it earlier, and we actually think this is a better piece of literature than The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. It's written with more detail, the world building is more rich, the rationale behind it is a little more sophisticated.
But I think it's aimed at the same age group.
Yeah, it is. But I feel like it doesn't talk down to kids as much as I felt like The Wizard of Oz did.
Right.
And it was more about, I appreciated that they focused so much on the change in character for the Shadow Witch and that character arc. I liked that the characters were a little more complex
mm-hmm.
and a little bit more
and there's a little more suspense. Wizard of Oz, it's they'd encounter something that was in their way, and the woodman would go, "Oh, well, here,
chop,
done."
Fixed it.
There was no suspense to that. This builds more suspense. It's not quite so certain that they're going to get out of the fix.
Yeah.
And the other thing I didn't expect, maybe you saw this coming, I didn't. When she was captured, she was expecting the prince that she had rescued to come and rescue her.
Yes.
Although it stands to reason that if she had to rescue him, what's he going to do?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that, but she was still expecting him to come and rescue her, and they would get married and go off happily ever after. And so then I forget exactly how it went, that he didn't get sent, but his brother got sent?
Because he was newly married.
Oh,
he
yeah.
was already married to one of the new princesses. And
That's right.
Yeah, so he was just, like, newly married. They were practically just celebrating his weddings. And then, like, there was something, too, about Prince Ember's, like, personality or something, where he just had the right kind of wisdom for this particular endeavor.
Yeah, so this other guy goes off to rescue her, and well, kind of shows its age.
Yeah.
Because he came to her rescue, she falls in love with him.
Absolutely. They fall in love with each other at first sight. Like, he sees her first because he's invisible when he first encounters her.
She's
and he's expecting
to have this other guy come, and she's going to fall in love with him, and somebody else shows up, and, oh, screw him, I'm going with you.
This one's cute. You'll do until something better comes along.
That was kind of interesting.
It was, but it's. I mean, I've heard a lot of, like, very the old romance novels, the actual, like, romantic period novels, did a lot of that kind of stuff too, or, like, Knights, like the what was it? Somebody in the Green Knight.
Gawain
in the Green Knight has a very similar kind of story arc where it's like instantaneous love story kind of thing, where chivalry and whatnot. So I was not surprised by that at all. I thought it was like, I kind of expected that, because now this other prince is married. She needs a happily ever after to get her out of the land of Ash, now that she's a huge target to basically all the other inhabitants who are friends with her brother. So I knew that it had to progress where she somehow gets out of there. But I didn't know how and to what degree, and if it would be tragic or not. I figured because it was a younger audience that it would still be a good, like, happy ending, but I didn't know how. So I really appreciated the story for that, where it kind of gives you, like, a really nice, like, complex social dynamic between all of these characters. Who I'm sure you probably encounter in the first book, but it may not. Like, I felt this book, for being a sequel, though I felt it was a sequel, really stood alone quite well.
Yeah, you can read just this, and it's perfectly fine. Yeah. Although, the moment I found out there was a sequel to this, I got to make time in my reading schedule to track it down and read it now. Because I'm sure it's just as good.
And it's plain language, kind of like The Wizard of Oz is, but a step up or two from that kind of
that's the thing to remember. Most of the people that watch us, most of you that watch us, are adults. This isn't an adult book.
No.
It's definitely written at a children's level. You know, probably between 6 and 10 is the optimum age for this. But I enjoyed it. I'm an adult. Okay.
Yeah,
I dealt with it.
It was a really fun adventure story. In fact, we actually talked about it beforehand. We're adding this to the Telltale Top Tales.
Yes, so
this is a fantastic
banner's going
book.
up. This is a Telltale Top Tale.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking for a good book for your kids to read, like I say, ages like 6 to 10 or 11, I think they're going to like this better than The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
The Wizard of Oz is simpler than this is. And yet this is simple enough for like a 6-year-old to
for new readers, this is a really good, simple language book for new readers.
And your kids that are watching Disney, like Frozen and stuff like that, Snow White, I'm scratching my head, why didn't Disney license this and make it one of their cartoons? This is the perfect Disney story.
It really is. It's got the good feel-good elements, but still enough suspense that it's interesting.
Yeah, and unlike Grimm's fairy tales, they don't have to remove all the really nasty parts.
One of the other things I really appreciated about this particular story in general was that it is, if you go to Project Gutenberg and get a download of this, get it with images, because the illustrations, while simple, are absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
Even, like, reading it on my tiny phone, I'm, like, zooming in to look at the pictures, and I'm just like, this is fantastic. These are great, very, like, Art Nouveau style illustrations, and it screams fairyland. It's perfect. And the other thing, I super appreciated that this world was built in a chimney. Yeah. I have never heard of a fairy that was domestic before. That was reliant on a domestic thing, like a fireplace, and much less fire. Most of the time when you hear it's forest fairies, or green fairies, or garden fairies. I had never heard of a fire fairy before.
Yeah.
And I think this is so original for that. I liked the world building of taking something familiar like a fireplace that kids in the 1920s, when this was written,
Well, it's kind of like
would
Lewis
know.
Carroll did with a rabbit hole and a looking glass.
Yeah.
It's kind of that same sort of thing.
It transports you into something that's super familiar, but gives you this fun idea to play with, and the flames as the castle, and all these names are like fire related or ash related or like fireplace related. It's so condensed and from something familiar, and makes it this whole other world that you can explore. And I thought that was really, really cool.
And of course, Lewis Carroll did that with a wardrobe.
Yes. Yeah. Not Lewis Carroll.
Not
C.S.
Carroll,
Lewis.
C.S. Lewis.
The other Lewis.
Something.
The Lewises. All the Lewises.
We'll be talking about one of his shortly.
Yes. So I thought that was really cool, especially for this younger age. It just took this really normal, everyday object and just made it magical. And I thought that was really well done. Super liked that.
Yeah, it's an incredible gem of a book. And like I say, it's boggling my mind why this isn't in print, why it isn't better known, why Disney hasn't made a movie. It's perfect for all of that.
It really is, and now it's public domain, so they could do whatever the heck they want.
And it's,
Disney,
and it
do
has
your thing.
And it's 2 movies,
Make this a thing.
Yeah, well, if they get their act together. They've been ruining a lot of properties lately.
Sadness. Oh, well. But yeah,
so,
great book.
Top Tail.
Top Tail. Loved it. Great for young readers. Great for adults who have to read to their children, too. This is a fun read-along story. You'll love it just as much as your kids will.
And great discovery by Emily.
Thank you. Totally random. I love when that happens, though. It just seems to work out for me.
Yeah.
I like that at thrift stores, too. I go to a thrift store and I find great books, or I find great stuff. Like, who would get rid of this?
It does seem like there are a lot of forgotten books from back then that are awesome books, but nobody remembers them because for whatever reason they weren't marketed right, or came out and were competing with Hemingway or something. I don't know, but they just never clicked and people don't remember.
And part of me worries, especially for the day and age that it was written in, and it's a female author. Like a lot of the time they were just overlooked. They weren't taken as serious writers, and this is a really good piece of, it's not high literature, but for a kid, this is pretty high literature.
Yeah,
and pretty high fantasy.
It's hard to say they were overlooked, because look at Little House on the Prairie. Okay, I'm forgetting the name, but she's extremely famous. Her books are still in print. Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yeah, so some of them did get known. Some others, like Myrtle Reed, were very popular in their day, but after they died, nobody remembers them now. And I think Gertrude Crownfield, too, was very popular in the 1920s, but after her death,
she fizzled away.
She died in 1945, and she worked as a school teacher for 10 years, by the way. So she was popular back then, but then just after her death, nobody kept her going, and Disney didn't make a movie, and it's just she's been forgotten. There's a lot of the science fiction writers that I grew up with that are going that way now. They're dead now, and their books are disappearing from the shelves, and everybody's forgetting about them.
Yeah.
Science fiction is harder because it becomes dated so quickly by how fast science advances.
Yeah.
But their stories are still really wonderful, but they're being forgotten.
A big thing, too, is preference in literature is so subjective. And a lot of publishers, I think, are making the subjective decision to be like, well, they weren't so popular, let's just stop producing their stuff. Or, oh, well, that was controversial. Like they did with Dr. Seuss, that was controversial, we're going to stop publishing that stuff. It's just a normal part. Or people just seem to be,
okay, this year people are buying horror stories, so fantasy isn't selling, they don't publish it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of makes it slide into the past.
Yeah, it's very subjective. So a lot of the time, people just get lost because loss of interest happened.
Yeah, unfortunately.
You never know. Or loss of interest from one person affected a whole company. So it is what it is, unfortunately. But this was a good find. We really enjoyed this one. We hope you will, too.
Yeah, I didn't think I would. Kids' book.
I didn't think I would either, but I was like, wow, I'm like...
Yeah.
Halfway through the first chapter, I'm like, this... Wow!
Yeah,
I'm kind of impressed!
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
So that's all we got to say, I think. Anything else?
No.
No, that's it. And we'll see you next time on Telltale, the Lido Show.
The Lido Show. The Lido Show with my brain and autocorrect. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.